Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Gabrielle Ray and I present cases of missing persons, the unidentified, and unsolved homicides. Today I'll be presenting another one of my Murdered in America series, and I will be talking about the cases of Theresa Marcoux and Mark Harnish, Edwin Heath Sr, and Dorothy Milliken. Theresa Marcoux and Mark Harnish were deceased on November 19th, 1978 in West Springfield, Massachusetts.
Theresa was 18 years old and Mark was 20 years old.
They were both residents of East Longmeadow, and they were described as very polite and carefree kids.
Theresa, or as loved ones would call her, Terry, was always laughing, and if she had a problem, you could never tell.
Both of them were also described as never complaining.
Maurice Fieldstein, Theresa's employer, said she was someone who made others feel like a person.
Theresa was described as bouncy, shining, and bright, and she only worked about 10 weeks with Maurice, but at least 12 people commented on how polite she was. And she loved people and pets, and he says that there was always something special about her. And she was described as small with big brown eyes. Theresa had worked at a hardware store, and Mark was an auto repair mechanic. And Mark was quiet and peculiar. He seemed to only be interested in cars and motorcycles, and he just let the world go by, he was described as. And he never had much money, but he never stole.
No matter how down on his luck he was, he would smile and say, "I'll get by."
The two were shot multiple times while sitting inside of Harnish's truck where they'd been living for several months. They were shot to death at a rest stop between the Memorial and the North End bridges on Route 5 in West Springfield. They were both shot with a large caliber handgun, and through the pickup truck windows, the bloody bodies were pulled out. They were probably sleeping when it happened, and it happened sometime after 1 a.m.
The bodies were dragged over a guardrail and dumped along the bank of the Connecticut River.
Law enforcement described the two as good kids, and they're still hoping to catch a break in the case. And there is a person of interest, but he is not publicly named, he or she. And we don't have the key to the whole thing that we need for an indictment, says law enforcement. Friends, students, and families gathered at East Longmeadow Funeral Home for Theresa's funeral service. And on the night of the funeral, the shopping mall, where adolescents frequently hung out, was very empty. A friend made a post on unsolvedmysteries.com and says that every time they try and contact law enforcement or psychics, strange things happened. And they said that their best friend was murdered and wants the person held responsible, but they didn't go more in depth as to what strange things happened. And as of September 28th, 2016, this case is still open. Now that is all the information I could find on the deaths of Theresa Marcoux and Mark Harnish. And I think it is absolutely terrible that these kids were just trying to live their lives and live out of the van and travel places and, follow their dreams. And they were killed in an absolutely brutal manner. And it just makes me sick to my stomach that these kids barely lived their lives. They were younger than me at the time, and it's just sickening because I'm a kid still. I haven't lived my life fully. And these people haven't either, and they didn't even get the chance to because somebody took their lives away, and that's not fair. It's not fair to their families, it's not fair to their friends, and it's not fair to themselves. And then to think that they were just dumped in the river like garbage, it just makes me sick to my stomach to think about that. And these were human beings. These were people. And they deserve to be treated like people. And we deserve to know who did this. Their family deserves to know who did this, the community. And they need justice in order to rest in peace fully, completely. And if anybody has any information on these two people, just comment on this video, reach out, make a Facebook page, because social media actually really helps a lot in these cases. And you never know, if you describe what they were like, and just to know that they were human beings. It could give somebody a soft spot, and then to say, hey, I know something about this, and I'm going to come forward because it's about that time. And if you or anybody you know have any information on this case, please contact the West Springfield Police Department at 413-263-3210. Edwin Heath Sr. was deceased on May 31st, 2015 in Bear, Delaware. He was 33 years old at his time of death. He was born on May 25th, and he was described as the funniest person ever and always cracking jokes. He loved cooking for his family and his kids, and he did chimney sweeps, landscaping, and he was an amazing chef.
His loved ones say that his personality could light up a room. He was funny, loved to talk, and always had to have the last word, and made people laugh. He went to a Catholic school in New York, and represented his school in the science fair, and won a spelling bee for the New York School District.
His family moved from New York City to Delaware, and his mother said that she thought it would be a good move and that it would be a good environment, but it proved to be wrong, unfortunately. And he was accepted to Cheyney University for broadcast journalism, and he attended Delaware Technical Community College. He was very attentive to his kids, and he was nicknamed Ed, Eddie, or Harlem. He was his mother's only son, and he came across all walks of life and knew lots of people. He was funny, he loved to talk, he made people laugh, and loved to spend time with his 4 kids. And he was engaged to his younger child's mom, and recently had gone back to school to be a phlebotomist, said his mother.
At approximately noon, police responded to a shooting in the 100 block of Antlers Lane in the community of Fox Run Apartments and townhouses.
He was discovered lying on the ground, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. And he was shot in broad daylight in front of his 2 kids. And first aid was attempted to be performed on him, but he was later pronounced dead at the scene. A male subject was seen fleeing on foot towards Route 40 just outside the complex.
The suspect is described as a black male in his mid-20s, approximately 5'10", 180 pounds, with a thin build, wearing dark pants and a light color sweatshirt.
Unfortunately, only a few details could be attained from the grainy surveillance video. His mother got a phone call from his daughter-in-law about his death. She said that they lived there for 15 years with no issues, and he was coming home with the kids, got out of the car, and someone shot him and ran. He was getting ready to get married, and now the family is planning his funeral.
His mother, Crystal Heath, misses her son dearly, and she had him cremated.
His mother refuses to buy an urn for him and will not until they solve the case. His ashes are still in the box from the funeral home.
On the anniversary of his death, his mother makes his favorite foods: homemade mac and cheese, collard greens, rice and beans, and oxtails. Police Chief Ron Bond says it struck a chord with me. It shows you the level of hurt that his mother is going through and the level of pain.
His mother just doesn't understand why anybody would want to hurt her son. And I truthfully do not either. He seemed like such a great guy, and, words don't do justice as to what he meant to this family and to his friends. And I don't know much about him myself, but from what I know, he did not deserve to be murdered in cold blood in front of his kids.
He is the king of hearts in the Delaware cold case playing cards.
This case breaks my heart for everybody involved, and I really hope that one day we can find answers because, there was a subject caught on surveillance. Somebody must know who that is. And somebody has to come forward and talk to law enforcement. They can remain anonymous. They're not going to be a snitch. They need to help this family out. And, just get some justice for them. Let them sleep at night without having nightmares and having to dream about what could have been. At least let them rest peacefully and let Edwin rest peacefully. It's been 6 years since this crime has been committed, and it's been 6 years too long for his family, his friends, his loved ones, and the community. If you or anybody you know have any information on this case, please call the Major Crime Squad at 302-395-2744 and ask for Detective Matthew DiSabatino, or call Crime Stoppers Tips at 800-TIP-3333 or via their website at www.nccpd.com. And again, you can remain anonymous. Dorothy Milliken was deceased on November 6, 1976 in Lewiston, Maine. She was 27 years old at the time of her death and a mother of 3. She was described as fun, feisty, and quick-witted. She was the best mom anyone could ask for, said her daughter, Tanya Ross, who was 7 years old at the time of her death. And her other 2 daughters are named Shelley and Erica.
She was spunky, tiny, brassy, kind, loving, all good things, said her daughter.
She lived in Sabatis, Maine, and she was often called Dottie, and her maiden name was Rancourt. She frequently did her laundry at night or in the early morning hours, but on that day she decided to do it at night because she was preparing to return to work from a maternity leave.
She left home after her husband went to bed to do some laundry at Beal's Laundromat on Lisbon Street at 4:40 a.m.
I remember my mom coming and wanting me to go home. And I remember giving her a hard time because I wanted to stay at my Aunt Mary's, and she finally caved and let me stay, said Tanya. Unfortunately, that would be the last day that her daughters would see her alive. She was found at 4:40 a.m. beside the building, and was found by a newspaper delivery person. She died of blunt force trauma to the head, and her laundry was unfinished, and she was brutally beaten, but there was no signs of sexual assault or a robbery. Nothing occurred inside. She was lured out somehow, said Larry Gilbert, a former investigator with the Lewiston Police Department. And Beal's Laundromat was located at 969 Lisbon Street. There are a couple people of interest, but there was never enough information to take the next step, said Gilbert. And the biggest regret of his whole career was not clearing this case, and he is hopeful that DNA could be used to track down the killer. And he said that somebody out there knows something.
Your first boyfriend, your first school dance, you get married, have kids, all those big moments in life that come along, and there's a void because you wish you could talk to your mom and that you could share those moments with her and little everyday things. It never goes away, says her daughter.
The pain doesn't go away. It's something that you think about every single day, said Tanya, and she was actually told by her grandfather about her mother's death. You took 45 years away from my mom, and I'm asking you to give up the last years of your life so that myself, my sisters, and my family can have closure, she asks. Given the brutality, it's definitely someone who knew her. She changed her appearance that day and went from long, straight hair to an afro. And the person definitely knew what car she was driving, she says. I don't hate the person who did it. I forgive the person who did it. But it's time for us to know what happened, said Tanya. My family deserves closure, and it's not fair that the person who did this has just gone through life without a conscience, like it was okay. It's not okay to take a life. And they should come clean, get it off their chest, and bring me, my sisters, and my family some closure. There's no doubt in my mind that the person who did this was so consumed by anger that they made a conscious effort to brutally strike down an unarmed woman without thinking about the consequences. To make things worse, this person had the audacity to just walk away, leaving the family consumed by anger, regret, and sorrow, said Detective Michael Chavez. Her headstone says Rancourt is her last name, and she is buried in West Bowden Cemetery in West Bowden, Maine. Now, that is all the information I could find on the death of Dorothy Milliken. And it seems that her family is on a conquest to get answers, and they haven't stopped since her death. And I absolutely commend them 100% for that. Because that's what I love to see, is families still fighting for justice for their loved one. Because they deserve it. And the family deserves justice, the family deserves peace, closure, anything to get their mind right. And Dorothy seemed like such a good mother, and what she could have been haunts her daughters, and that just makes me absolutely sick. I think one day somebody should come forward with answers, because I know somebody is holding something back, and it's weighing on them. Anybody who did this, who knows anything, come forward. It's about that time. It's been since 1976, for crying out loud. I will never understand how anyone could go through life and their conscience doesn't weigh on them if they do something as brutal as this. And I really hope that one day her family can find answers, because I really, really admire their drive to find answers, and that her death is still in the headlines. We gotta keep these people's deaths in the headlines, because that's the only way that information is going to be spread about them, and people are going to know, and maybe someone will come forward one day and say, hey, I saw something. No matter how big or how small it is, it could be something that breaks the case wide open. I say that in every video, but I can't stress it enough. And, it breaks my heart, these cases, that I even have to present them. Because these people should have been treated like human beings, instead of just thrown away like trash, or murdered like they didn't mean anything. And it makes me absolutely just sick to my stomach. If you or anybody you know have any information on this case, please call the Maine State Police at 207-657-3030, or you could write to them at 1 Game Farm Road, Gray, Maine 04039. These cases, no matter how old, how new, how much information, how little information, are still so important, and we need to keep them in the headlines. We need to keep them in the front lines of our mind. Because these people were people. They had personalities, they had families, they woke up every day and they saw their neighbors. And their right to be somebody is taken away from them. And they deserve justice. They deserve something that will, illuminate their names and just let people know that I was important and I am important. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful night.